Let's talk more about all this. Let's bring in Ivo Daalder. He was the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations in the Obama administration. He is also the co-author of The Empty Throne, America's Abdication of Global Leadership. Ambassador, so good to see you.
Glad to be here. I was ambassador to NATO, not the United Nations.
To NATO. Oh, sorry about that. Big correction to be made there. Thank you. All right, Ambassador, so despite the military losses piling up, Putin, is pushing forward with this illegal annexation. I mean, to whom is he sending this message? Is it the region or is it the world?
Well, he's first of all sending the message back to the people in Russia. He's not had a very good week. When you look back, he had a partial mobilization that has really gone terribly wrong. More people are leaving the country than have been able to be mobilized so far. He's lost a key strategic area that Nick just talked about in Lymon, an area that was necessary for the defense of and taking control of the entire Donbas region, which he is now losing as well. And he is finding that the continuation of this war is not leading to where he wants it to lead, which is declaring the control of parts of Ukraine, annexing it, but is losing on the battlefield, and that's his biggest problem right now. The military side is not on the same level as what he's trying to achieve politically.
So what or who can stop Putin?
Well, ultimately, only Vladimir Putin and those around him can stop him. It's clear that this is a man who has not learned the first law of holes, which is that if you're in one, you stop digging. Every time he finds that he's in trouble, he just brings out a bigger shovel or a bulldozer in order to go deeper. And it's not clear that he's ever going to stop. So unless people around him are going to be able to tell him, we need to shift course and perhaps we need to have a new leadership, my fear is he's going to continue to push and push and push. And that's one of the concerns we have. He has one big weapon left, nuclear weapons. He continues to threaten the use of these weapons. He did it again in his speech on Friday, saying that this is a possibility. And there is this worry that now that he has declared part of Ukraine Russian territory, he might be tempted to use nuclear weapons in the defense of what he falsely claims is Russian territory. The good news is that I think the president of the United States and everyone else has made very, very clear that the consequences of him doing so would be catastrophic for Russia, for him. And as a result, we hope that saner minds will prevail. But it is a dangerous time.
Yeah, and on the issue of that continued, nuclear weapons threat, I mean, here's the U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin telling CNN of his assessment of Putin's willingness to use nuclear weapons.
There are no checks on Mr. Putin. Just as he made the irresponsible decision to invade Ukraine, he could make another decision. But I don't see anything right now that would lead me to believe that he has made such a decision.
So what are your views on that?
I think he's right. I mean, all the intelligence that we hear about indicates that there are no signs of imminent or possible use of nuclear weapons. But as Secretary Austin said, this is a decision that really one man has in his own hands. It's Vladimir Putin's decision. Once and if he makes that decision, the consequences would be horrific. The key for us is to make it absolutely clear that the West stands united, is fully behind Ukraine. Ukraine is going to recapture in one form or another through diplomacy or military means the territory that the Russians have occupied, and that even the threat or actual use of nuclear weapons is not going to change course. That's fundamentally the message that needs to be sent to Vladimir Putin, and it is being sent, I think, by NATO, by the United States, by all of our allies in Europe. And as long as we're united on that, I think in the end, Putin is going to find that he is on the short end of the stick.
All right. Former ambassador to NATO, big apologies for our error at the very top, Ivo Daalder. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.